Hello, please take your seats. Please take your seats. We are going to get started. Please take your seats. All right. Aaron, can we do the roll, please?
Councilmember Morrell present, Councilmember Moreno present, Councilmember Jeruso present, Councilmember Thomas present. We have a quorum.
All right. That being said, the first up is the approval of the minutes. I'll move to approve the minutes. Okay, a second. Second by Councilmember Moreno. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved unanimously. First up, we have item 3, the resolution of the FRP extension. For those of you who are following, this is us. The committee is considering a resolution to grant 3-year extension of the Energy New Orleans electric and gas formula rate plan riders. There are 3 additional formula rate plans instead of a rate case. FRPs are less costly and time consuming than a rate case. I'd like to thank the Alliance for their comments, and as well as Energy in New Orleans and the advisors for the result, which is in the best interest of the taxpayers, ratepayers of New Orleans. So that being said, I will move. Do we have any comments on that? Okay, move to approve. Second by Councilman Moreno. Please vote your machines. 4 yeas, no nays. The resolution is forwarded to full council. Next up, we have item 4, a presentation by Broadband Equity Access and Development. Sorry, a presentation by the Office of Information Technology and Innovation, which will present on the Broadband Equity Access and Development Program. So who do we have presenting? Is it you?
You're a little efficient today. They're on their way.
They're on their way. All right, well, get a cup of coffee. All right. Waiting with bated breath. So whatever you guys are ready. Good morning. Go whenever you're ready.
Good morning. The City of New Orleans is embarking on a process to challenge the BEAD grant proposals. The state of Louisiana, in an unprecedented move, is the first state in the nation to have its BEAD, which stands for Broadband Equity Access and Development Fund plan, approved by the NTIA. This plan awards to the state of Louisiana $1.4 million for broadband and internet funding. We see here an unprecedented opportunity to participate in this process, and what we'd like to introduce to you today is the effort that we think is most important to that work and our representation of New Orleans. BEAD is largely a program to improve internet services, largely focused on in the state of Louisiana, largely focused on rural areas and places where there is no service. It is much like the electrical revolution, where there was a lot of effort to get electrical services into areas that did not have it. Here we are in this internet revolution. What we're trying to do is largely the same thing. However, in cities like New Orleans, the ability to underrepresent an urban area is just as critical as building new internet services in rural areas. So a population or a town with 10,000 subscribers or 10,000 people who don't have access to the internet, we feel is as critical as an urban city with 100 people without sufficient internet access or access to the internet. So this challenge is very significant to us for those reasons. So what we're introducing is what we plan to do. So the funding for broadband, as I mentioned, is unprecedented for the state of Louisiana. $1.4 billion for affordable, reliable, high-speed internet service is what's been awarded. First state in the nation. There's been a great bit of information about the challenge and how it's, the program and the award and how it's playing out in Louisiana. In fact, several parishes have already.
Councilman Thomas for a question. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Apologize.
Several parishes in Louisiana have already had large announcements. The Gumbo grant process is bringing internet service to those areas. What is happening now is a 90-day challenge process. This, again, Louisiana unprecedented, is the first state to open its challenge process. Essentially, the Federal Communications Commission has a map of all broadband service for the nation. And in each area, once a plan is submitted, then a challenge process opens. That process is in 3 parts. It allows cities, states to report information about broadband service. It allows the internet service providers to challenge that information. And then the state has to make a representation or arbitrate those rebuttals and challenges and complete the map process. So the state of Louisiana embarked on its challenge process. It opened on October 6th. We are in phase 1 of the 90-day process, which is the first 30 days that allows cities, agencies to challenge internet services in their area. There are several permissible challenge areas. Essentially, you can say that you have underperforming internet service. You can also update the maps to show, identify community anchor institutions, and also enforceable commitments. So what we think is most significant for us is to be involved in the process where we're either updating our internet information or we are supplementing that map with information about our community anchor institutions and also our multi-dwelling units. And those are enforceable commitments by the carriers. October is the challenge process. In November, beginning on November 6th, the ISPs, the internet service providers, will have an opportunity to rebut that information, and Connect LA, which is Louisiana's broadband office, will adjudicate those results in December to complete the plan for Louisiana. This is an unprecedented opportunity for New Orleans. And the reason that we feel this is an unprecedented opportunity is because we have the opportunity to do 3 things that are really significant and important to us. It is to educate the public. Digital literacy is one of our goals. So we are looking for every opportunity to educate on the importance of internet access in our communities for our residents, and also to raise awareness about services in New Orleans. We all get complaints about services and options for services. This is the public's opportunity to challenge that information. Many people say that they don't know why they don't have service or the service is insufficient. This is not an easy process, but it is our opportunity to raise awareness for this and to assist them in reporting that information. Challenging the information is significant and very important for New Orleans. We want to submit as much information as we can to the state of Louisiana because we want representation for our services here in New Orleans. So this is an opportunity for us to submit that challenge data. And last and finally, most significantly, we have an opportunity to increase the funding allocation for New Orleans. And ultimately, our goal is to improve internet services for our residents. The Connect LA Challenge portal we've already registered to be an institution to report that challenge data. So the portal opened on October 6th, and we have registered there. So we will be using this process, the challenge dashboard, to submit information to the state of Louisiana. Our representation is pretty accurate or pretty fair. We are underrepresented. We are underserved in many areas, but this is an opportunity to really make more specific recommendations to the state of Louisiana about our service here. And also what we think is really significant is to identify those community anchor institutions. The state will require that community anchor institutions have a gig service. So this is something that could supplement the city's funding for those community anchor institutions, and it also could relieve the operational costs that we experience paying to have services to the community and anchor institutions in our city. So what we've embarked on is what we've named the New Orleans Slow Internet Challenge. We want this to be easily understood by our residents. We did not want to give it a name that is more akin to the state and the federal process, realizing this can be onerous. So we chose a name that resonated with our residents, and it's Slow Internet. Basically, if your internet is slow, if it's underperforming, we do want you to help us by reporting that to us. The city of New Orleans will host the website. We will assist users and residents in reporting the data. We will collect the data and make our submission to the state. Again, our goals are to raise awareness, collect service data, submit our challenge information, and our ultimate goal is to increase BEAD funding for New Orleans. And this is the way that we can make an impact. What we are asking of the council and other agencies is to assist us in this. If there is any way that there can be community outreach, that you can help us raise awareness for the challenge, we'd love to give you that information. We've met with the council utilities office and presented this opportunity. We will be doing outreach, Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Engagement, the Neighborhood Summit. We'll be attending meetings. We will be passing out information, and we will advertise this on NOLA.gov. The site is up. It's ready. We'll be making announcements to city employees, but any way that we can get the word out is really important. We're going to engage. What we can do is identify our community anchor institutions, our city agency, and our NORD centers. We will engage with the schools and the libraries to identify those and have those represented as well. We are working with our GIS department and the City Planning Commission to challenge the multi-dwelling units. Multi-dwelling units are units with 3 or more residents. If we could identify those and identify services there, we can also challenge those. And our ultimate goal is to provide as much technical support to our residents as we can. So we have an email address, and we have staff that will be dedicated to assisting any residents should they want to present the challenge, should they want to complete the challenge. Have any questions for us?
Councilman Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. You know, we often hear about food deserts or certain communities that don't have access to things that not that people want, but people need. Do we have a map that shows broadband or BEAD deserts and where and what communities, what neighborhoods drastically need that infusion or need that program or access?
What kind of map?
It's something that if you were talking about food deserts, you could pull up a
Yes.
map and it would show you a food desert. We're talking about broadband and access to broadband, especially now that we know. Is there anything that shows in our community where the greatest need for access is.
that we own, that the
Yes,
state
yeah,
manufactured.
yeah.
No. No, and that's largely because we don't have access to that data. So this is really a way for us for the first time to be able to sort of capture that information from the residents. If you ask the utilities, they'll tell you that they have broadband across the city. We know that's probably not 100% the case, but we don't have data to illustrate that. That's what this challenge actually gives residents the opportunity to push back and say, we are not getting the service that we pay for.
Well, I asked
Or-
that
or
question
demand.
because during COVID, we heard so much about the inability for students in public schools or students in certain communities. You know, the school system had an idea about who had access to the internet service. So you're saying we don't have anything that says this neighborhood, this community, this block, this area.
Not as an authoritative city data set.
Would it be important to have that information?
It would be fantastic. It would be
All right,
fantastic.
so what is it gonna take to get that?
We need, in this case, the public's participation. But also if the utilities were willing to share that information with the city.
So what about if the schools knew which kids couldn't log on and log off? Is there a way to get that information or to work with them to get that information about the kids and the families who had trouble during COVID?
Yeah, we could definitely reach out to the school board to see if they, A, still have that information, and B, if it's maintained annually. To keep that information up to date, to have that snapshot in 2019 versus
Okay.
2023.
Do we have a general idea of which communities need more access without specific data?
We have a general idea. The
Okay.
school system and the school board works with the education superhighway. The education superhighway is an agency that reports this type of data. So they have information that schools are reporting. And as Eric mentioned, the authoritative data would be data that someone has verified, and that is what we're working to collect.
Now, you mentioned Louisiana's getting 1.4 billion, and then you talk about funding and opportunities. How will the city access that money? Because just because Louisiana gets funds, especially given the environment and maybe even now the election results, it may be a little more difficult given how it's too often it seems to be New Orleans versus the state. And given some of the rhetoric from the campaign, it may end the voting that happened and who got elected and who controls the House. It may even be more so New Orleans versus the state. So how do we compete for that? Is there a certain percentage that is guaranteed or committed from New Orleans? Because a lot of federal funds are pass-throughs.
So the way New Orleans, Louisiana's approaching this, Dumbo grants were the first allocations of BEAD funding for internet build. This approach is largely an opportunity for the service providers to say, we understand this area is underserved, there isn't service here. I'll apply for the grant to bring or to build and construct internet services in these areas. So what we have to have is data that says this area is actually underserved. Once those areas are identified by the state, they open up the application process and the internet service providers can apply and they award funds. So what needs to be undisputable is that there is a need for service. Processes like this allow us to challenge what is reported for us and say, you said this area has service and we've had enough residents and we've elevated the census blocks to show that this service is not sufficient. And then the state's responsibility is to say, no, this area isn't sufficiently served and allocate funding and have a provider apply to service that.
And so that's why having a map and having where access is or isn't,
Yes.
it'll be important in terms of putting that grant application together.
Yes, the numbers are indisputable. So if we were leaving this to what people think should happen in New Orleans and what
Right.
people say, this is where we need to make.
And my only question is, the numbers are indisputable when you talk about fair share
Yes,
and what New Orleans generates versus what it gets. So we're still at the whim of the state to determine approve our grant and determine what our funding will be, correct?
I think it's important to note too, as a part of this challenge, the evidence that's required is a speed test on 3 separate days. The form can, essentially takes you through that process of taking a screenshot and all of that. You can't fill out the form unless you take a speed test on day 1 and then take it again on day 2 and then take it again on day 3. And the reason they want to do that is for that evidence. The proof can't be anecdotal. You can't just say, I don't have internet. There has to be evidence through a speed test.
Yeah, I was writing down your comments, so just a couple more points and then I'll be finished.
Sure.
Cox is fast is slow. So, and always not reliable. So when you talk about slow Louisiana, what do you really mean by that? When in our supposedly most reliable internet services, it's not that reliable and it's not that accessible depending on how the wind blows.
So the definition of serve is technically 100 megabytes download speed, right?
Right.
Cox sells service at that rate. They sell slower rates. Effectively, anyone.
Their slower rate is like not having internet.
And they are underserved, right? So that is what the resident needs to report. Anything under 100 megabytes, a speed test will show. Those numbers are what we report as underserved. So their fast is slow.
And then last one,
Underserved.
you mentioned anchor institutions, right?
Yes.
What would an anchor institution look like in a community that doesn't have access to the most reliable broadband or B program?
It could look like a NORD facility
Okay.
that they go into
Okay.
for public Wi-Fi or a school or the library.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Council Member Marna.
Thank you. Just one quick question. First, Ms. LaGrue, thank you for your work on this issue for many, many years. You've been dedicated to increasing internet access in our city for quite some time. In fact, you actually put together a plan a few years back talking about roughly $30 million worth of improvements to increase broadband access through the city. Do you think that potentially this grant could help us with that?
Absolutely. This is the type of funding that relieves the burden on cities. So we've submitted several capital budget requests for this. This council approved funding for public Wi-Fi during the pandemic. We're working.
Oh, I remember.
For that. We are working to.
Joe Russo remembers, yeah.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can go back and actually re-examine the whole issue of potentially providing that public Wi-Fi, because that was, really what our main focus was when we created the task force. You were part of it, led by Aaron Spears with our Curo office. And I think we really had a kind of a good working plan as to how to move toward that, which included your previous work on the whole analysis of needing the $30 million worth of upgrades to our broadband. So, maybe it's time to relook at that.
We are looking, this is pre-step one.
Yeah.
This is, we had a step one already identified. We've been talking about that quite a good bit. This opportunity came along and we said, this has got to precede any other efforts because this is so important and so timely. But yes, in a way, the federal government is saying we realize cities just don't have the resources to build internet and broadband and infrastructure in their cities. So this program is so significant in relieving that responsibility and that financial burden. It allows the carriers and the service providers to participate. It incentivizes them. You said this area is served. We really know it's not. We've raised the bar on what service is, and now we're going to fund you to build that infrastructure. So it's a win-win.
This could be really great if we could finally get that money in place. I know, like you talked about, the council has put different several millions of dollars toward this project, but if we could get it all, funded and ready to go, that would be great.
We think this is a great kickoff to.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. LaGrue.
A couple of quick questions, just of clarification. So I know that you guys have an idea of what threshold of participation you like from residents of New Orleans. Give us an idea of what you're looking for as far as to really push this challenge goal.
It's uncertain how our residents will participate. The process is not easy.
But in an ideal world, what do you think's a good number for us to aim for as a city?
I'm gonna ask Eric to.
I don't know if I can answer that. As you know, ideally we get a good representation within areas that cannot get the service that they are essentially told they should be able to get, right? And we can get a good concentration within those areas. The reason I was bringing up the process is it's not going, it's a form that takes 3 days to fill out, right? And so, just making a form difficult on day one automatically eliminates half the people that are just like going to say, this is too hard. Making it over 3 days makes it even more difficult. You have to do these steps and then upload this information. So, it really is, we really want to be able to get the word out to really encourage people to please take the time to do this process. And hopefully we can get a good number of.
Right, because I mean, although the state certainly has a huge say in how this money will be allocated, a lack of participation is almost disqualifying in itself, because the reality is you want to have a paper trail showing
Right.
we had engagement, we have evidence showing this is an issue. And the challenge is that when you don't create the paper trail and let's say no one participates across the entire state, you're really giving the state the authority at that point to say, well, if no one responded, let's just do it based upon our own, napkin math. When you have participation, when the public gets engaged, when the public fills out the 3-day survey, which I mean, that is aggressive. That's worse than the Gambit like survey you have to do once a year, where you have to fill out half of it. It's talking about 3 days of a survey. But if you create the paper trail, it makes it harder for state and federal partners to arbitrarily spend money if you have responses. So the council will certainly work with you very diligently. I think it's going to be important on the front end to start with. This is a 3-day survey. Because if you don't start with that and we don't lead with that, when people get on board and say, "Oh, 3 days, I'm not in for that," that's problematic. I do think it's interesting, and I frequently tell people all the time, it's really important you test your internet speed. It is amazing how many people pay for internet speeds they never will get. And I say that because I had my own experience with that, where we were struggling with internet with a previous provider. Everything seemed to not be working. I started testing the speed, and the speed was about a half or a third of what I was paying for. And when I upped to the next tier, it got slightly better, which was still nowhere near, less than half of what I was paying for. And I say that because there's two issues there. One is, if you're never going to get the speed you're paying for, why are you paying for a gigabyte of speed when you're going to get 300 megabytes per second? And what's frustrating is, oftentimes the provider knows you will never get a gigabyte of speed. And they don't inform people properly. They always have the excuse of, well, we'll send a tech out there. He'll look at your house, and they don't disclose to individuals that the infrastructure in their neighborhood might make it so they're never capable of that speed. So it is amazing to me how many people I know personally who are paying double, triple the cost of internet service for speeds they'll never get. And that's why the survey is so important, because you should be telling someone that though Cox may tell the FCC gigabyte speed is available, they know gigabyte speed is not available because the investment in fiber optic was not made to make it available. And if we're not making those disclosures, what happens is they get credit for having gigabyte speed. They charge everyone for gigabyte speed, though if you just do some real basic speedtest.com, you'll find out you're not getting gigabyte speed. And it allows providers to really cut corners on infrastructure while restricting the ability of people to fully access the internet. I significantly believe that one of the big challenges of our city to be competitive, generally speaking, in the modern day and future economic development is going to be access to high-speed broadband. Post-COVID, we had a tremendous amount of people move here when remote work was really a thing, and many of them left right afterwards because of the inability to get consistent high-speed internet. And to your point, the survey is so important because when those individuals moved to New Orleans and looked at information available, they were told they would get speeds that didn't exist. And it's so important for us to participate in programs like this challenge, because it allows us to leverage federal resources to fill that gap and to get us where we need to be. And I think if we don't participate, it'll be a tremendous missed opportunity, because then we're back at the mercy of the providers who are going to really only install as they see fit in a timeline that suits them, and not necessarily that meets need. Because at this point, it used to be you could just get dial up and you'd have access, but if you don't have sufficient speed now, the internet just doesn't work.
Right.
I mean, there are people who truly, even if they had the technology to access the internet, just by virtue of infrastructure, there is a minimal speed at which it just is non-functioning. And this is our opportunity to try and elevate the entire city to be competitive, because we don't have the tax base that Austin has. We don't have the tax base that San Diego has. We're not going to catch them on our own. We need programs like this that leapfrog. Thank you for being here today. We will make sure that the council works with you on trying to engage the public to get involved. We all should definitely lead with it's a three-day challenge, because it's gonna, you're right, it's gonna take a lot of people away to know that's a 3-day obligation.
Thank you for that feedback. We did want to get your comments, see how we could improve this. State has not made this a long process. So as you mentioned, it is our word against theirs. This is not easy. We met with the state mid-September, said this was coming. Took a while for us to get all of the information to understand how this would actually work. So we don't have very long. I did want to just note, you asked about what we thought our participation levels would be, and making sure that we collect that information. We are collecting through NOLA.gov, and we as an institution, as an agency, will report that. So we will have the numbers, and we are aggregating that information. So we'll understand how our residents have reported and what has been reported, and just the simple mechanics. Just to note, if we get 6 reports in a census block, it elevates the entire census block. So we'll be looking for things like that to occur and identifying where we've gotten 6 reports in an area, and then we would know that a census block went from a data that said it was served to actually verification that it's underserved.
Cool. And to the point that was made earlier, I think it's a tremendous opportunity for us to reach out to the New Orleans Public School Board. I know, because I do this all the time, schools push surveys on parents, and we sit and through the obligation of filling out the numerous amount of surveys we're sent. If schools were to get engaged, if schools were to make contests or to make other kind of activities to promote engagement, like if you said, just as an example, this is a silly one, but one that really has happened. If you said the class that has the most surveys gets a pizza party at a school, you would be amazed at how insane kids get at harassing their parents to do things for something as economical as that. So, I mean, I think we really could, between working with the school board, between doing outreach to the council and other parties, we could really push that engagement. But I would be happy, I know the council will be happy as all to work with you to try and maximize engagement, because if we create the receipts and the state is arbitrary and not giving us the money, at least we can make arguments to federal partners that we were shortchanged. If we don't have the receipts, we don't participate, and the state arbitrarily gives out the money, we don't really have a defense at that point. So we'll work with y'all to solve that problem.
The kids might be the best advocates.
Kids are really annoying about surveys. So trust me, it is. That my teacher said they're gonna see who responds. You have to check a box at the end. If our class wins, we get a pizza party. And it's just like, I'll buy you a pizza. Can I not fill out the survey? But they're adamant about it. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity. Thank y'all for being here today. We really appreciate it. Next, we move we go into executive session regarding the STR cases. Seconded, please vote your machines. 4 yeas, no nays. We are going to an executive session. Thank you.